1 dead in Mykolaiv shelling, according to Ukrainian Regional Administration. At least one person is dead after shelling in the southeastern Ukrainian port city of Mykolaiv, the regional state administration said Saturday. Mykolaiv is under Ukrainian government control, but is not far from the front lines of fighting between Ukrainian and Russian forces. It is about 60 kilometers, 37 miles, away from Kherson, which has been under Russian control since the early days of the invasion. On Saturday morning, May 28, occupying troops of Russia once again fired at the city of Mykolaiv, according to a statement. And again the blow fell on residential areas. One person died on the spot. At least 6 civilians are also known to be injured. The statement said at least 2 rounds landed in the courtyards of residential high-rises, damaging several buildings. Mykolaiv city was shelled again this morning, according to a previous statement. The Russians hit the yard of the residential area, 20 meters away from a kindergarten. There are injured people due to the shelling. Here's what you need to know. Russian forces are seeking to encircle the defenders of the Luhansk city of Severodonetsk, the last major Ukrainian stronghold in the region, as Moscow's troops continue to press their offensive in the east of the country while outnumbered Ukrainian forces attempt to. Here's the latest on Russia's war in Ukraine. Ukrainian military says Severodonetsk not cut off. Serhiy Haidai, the head of Luhansk's regional military administration, said on Saturday the key eastern Ukrainian city of Severodonetsk was not cut off, as Russian troops press a concerted offensive in the Haidai said intense Russian shelling was underway in Severodonetsk, an industrial center which is the last major stronghold of Ukrainian control in Luhansk. Ukrainian forces are fighting to stave off an apparent effort by Russian forces to encircle the defenders of Severodonetsk, while Russian troops make advances from several directions. France and Germany's leaders urged Putin to agree to a ceasefire. The leaders of Germany and France held a phone call with Vladimir Putin on Saturday, in which they pressed the Russian president to agree to an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine and withdraw Russia's troops from the country. A statement from the French presidential office, the Élysée Palace, said, any solution to the war must be negotiated between Moscow and Kyiv. The two leaders also urged Putin to lift the blockade of Odessa to allow the export of Ukrainian grain through the Black Sea in order to avoid a world food crisis, according to the statement. Putin signs law scrapping upper age limit to enlist in Russian military. The Russian president has signed a law scrapping the upper age limit for Russians and foreigners to join the military as contract service members, according to Russian state news agency. Russia's State Duma passed the bill on Wednesday, but Putin's signature was needed for it to become law. Previously, citizens aged 18 to 40 and foreigners aged 18 to 30 could enlist in the Russian military. Zelensky and UK PM discuss global food crisis. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson spoke by phone on Saturday morning to discuss several issues related to the war in Ukraine. Among the matters the two discussed was the growing global food supply crisis, which has been exacerbated by Russia's blockade of Ukrainian ports. Zelensky said Friday that some 22 million tons of grain meant for export were sitting in silos, as Russia is blocking export routes through the Black Sea and Azov Sea. Kharkiv district shelled, says regional official. Russian forces have shelled a district of the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, the regional military governor said in a statement Saturday. Oles Inyahubov, head of Kharkiv Regional Military Administration, said the Kyiv district of Kharkiv city had been subjected to Russian shelling over the past 24 hours, and that several shells hit the suburb of Maladanivka overnight, with no casualty. A 65-year-old woman was killed by Russian fire in the village of Slatin, he added. Ukrainian troops have in recent weeks pushed back Russian forces from around Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city. But it has remained in range of some Russian weaponry. Ukrainian Orthodox Church breaks ties with Moscow's Patriarch Kirill over his support for war. A branch of Ukraine's Orthodox Church has broken ties with Russia's Patriarch Kirill over the Russian spiritual leader's support for the war in Ukraine, deepening a rift between the Moscow Church and other Orthodox believers. Leaders of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, UOC, which had been formally subordinate to the Moscow Patriarchate of the Russian Orthodox Church, held a council Friday in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In a statement, the council said it condemns the war as a violation of God's commandment "Thou shalt not kill," and urged the governments of Ukraine and Russia to pursue a path of negotiation. But the council also had criticism for Patriarch Kirill, who has given his support to the invasion of Ukraine and has put his church firmly behind Russian President Vladimir Putin, and said it had opted for the full independence and autonomy of the Ukraine. A large part of the Orthodox community in Ukraine has already moved to establish independence from Moscow. That movement took on further momentum in 2018, after Patriarch Bartholomew I of Constantinople, a Greek cleric who is considered the spiritual leader of Orthodox believers worldwide, endorsed the establishment of an independent Orthodox. The Russian Orthodox Church and the Moscow Patriarchate, which has become closely entwined with the Russian state under Putin's rule, responded by cutting ties with Bartholomew. The Orthodox Church of Ukraine, which has allegiance to Bartholomew, is separate from the UOC, which made its announcement Friday. But the emergence of a church independent of Moscow has also infuriated Putin, who has made restoration of the so-called Russian world a centerpiece of his foreign policy and has dismissed Ukrainian national identity. As the UOC Council's statement on Friday said, the war had been devastating for members of the church. During the 3 months of the war, more than 6 million citizens of Ukraine were forced to leave the country. These were mainly Ukrainians from the southern, eastern, and central regions of Ukraine. A large majority of them are faithful children of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the statement read. It is necessary to further develop the mission abroad among Orthodox Ukrainians to preserve their faith, culture, language and Orthodox identity. France and Germany's leaders urged Putin to agree to a ceasefire in a Saturday phone call. From CNN's Stephanie Halas. The leaders of Germany and France held a phone call with Vladimir Putin on Saturday, in which they pressed the Russian president to agree to an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine and withdraw Russia's troops from the country. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and French President Emmanuel Macron spoke with Putin for 80 minutes on their initiative, according to the German government's press office. The German Chancellor and the French President urged an immediate ceasefire and a withdrawal of Russian troops. They called on the Russian President to engage in serious direct negotiations with the Ukrainian President and to find a diplomatic solution to the conflict, the German government news release said. A statement from the French presidential office, the Élysée Palace, said, any solution to the war must be negotiated between Moscow and Kyiv. In the call, Macron and Scholz also called for the release of about 2,500 Azovstal defenders who have been taken as prisoners of war by Russian forces, the French readout said, in a reference to Ukrainian forces who were captured after defending the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. In addition, the two leaders urged Putin to lift the blockade of Odessa to allow the export of Ukrainian grain through the Black Sea in order to avoid a world food crisis, according to the statement. Some context, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Friday that negotiations between Russia and Ukraine were frozen. He also accused Kyiv of making contradictory statements that Moscow did not understand. A day earlier, Peskov said Moscow expected Kyiv to accept the status quo and meet its territorial demands, following remarks by former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger that appeared to suggest Ukraine has to agree to give up Crimea and much of the Donbas. In a May 23 interview with Reuters, Ukrainian presidential advisor Mikhailo Podolyak ruled out agreeing to a ceasefire with Russia and said Kyiv would not accept any deal with Moscow that involves ceding territory.